So this happened last night, and neither I nor my friends who were there with me can explain it. I'm not 100% sure if this is a glitch or paranormal or what, but I'd love some outside opinions. Myself and two friends were in the car. I was in the front passenger seat, my friend S was driving, and my other friend B was in the back seat. We all had just gotten off work and were carpooling home. There was road work on the freeway, so we decided to take the back roads. The main road that we take to get home is about 25 miles long, and there's nothing but open farmland. Nothing around us besides fields with cows. No houses, barns, nothing. And I've never once seen a pedestrian on this road. It was around 11:15 p.m. when we were about halfway down the road. We came around a corner and there was a person standing in the middle of the road, directly in front of our car. There was no time to stop before hitting him, but S hit the brakes and we all just braced for the impact, and I mentally prepared to call an ambulance for the man we were about to run over. But we didn't hit anything or anyone. We came to a stop and I turned around to look behind us, and there was no one there, and there was nothing. All three of us in the car saw him standing there, and there wouldn't have been anywhere for him to go. The road has a rock wall to one side and empty fields with nowhere to hide on the other side. He was nowhere to be found, though. We called out to see if anybody was there or if they needed help, but there was no response. I'm still a bit shaken by all of this. It was very clearly a person about to be hit by a car. He was short, but it was hard to tell his height from the car. He was wearing dirty jeans and a brown jacket, and it looked like his hair was either pulled back into a ponytail or it could have been just slicked back really well. Anyways, he looked right at us with this exact expression you'd see by somebody about to be run over by a car at 60 miles an hour. And then he just disappeared. I work at a fast food pizza place, one of the big name chain ones. I'm sure you know which one it is. I was the closing manager that night. It was 4/20/21, and it was just me and my closing driver. And yes, I understand it was 4/20 and people like to celebrate and do stuff on that day, but I was not, I repeat, I was not on any kinds of mind-altering substances that night, even though it was 4/20. Anyways, my driver was on delivery and an order had popped up on the screen. It was an order placed on the web, so I didn't have to talk to anybody. I put 2 pizzas on the side in the oven and I go wait by the cutting station for the food to come out. While I'm waiting, a silver bar falls onto the back floor in the back area where we wash dishes. The silver bars are separators to separate containers on our make line. It's like a buffer, if you will. Anyways, it falls and nobody's there in the store except for me, so it freaks me the heck out as it's really loud. I walk back in that general direction and turn the corner. There's the bar just sitting on the floor. I took a video after it already fell and sent it to my wife because I was tripping out. I didn't pick it up or touch it at all. I just walked back to the cut station to box up the order. Well, the weird thing is, when I went back to the cut station, I boxed up the side and the 2 thin crust pizzas. At this point, my driver walks in the front door of the store. And as I turn around to grab the order to give it to him, I tell him that the delivery is up and ready to go. Then, mysteriously out of nowhere, I saw another pizza that was ready to be taken out of the oven. I only had that one order, and it was 2 pizzas and 1 side, and they were already ready. And here's this duplicate 3rd thin crust pizza. I don't know why. Initially, I thought that it was my driver that made it, but he couldn't have. He came back while I was boxing up the order, and I saw him come through the door. But I asked him anyways, because I didn't know what else to do. And I already knew what he was going to tell me. Because I was freaked out, I just had to ask him. So I asked if he made the pizza. Of course, he chuckles and says no. He had just gotten back into the store. So I cut the pizza, then I threw it away. I know, I'm weird. I just have a habit of cutting the pizza when it comes out of the oven. But neither of us wanted to eat it since we didn't know where it came from. It just tripped me out how it happened. He left on his delivery and I was on edge for the rest of the night. I don't know how to explain it or what happened. maybe it crossed over from another universe when the silver bar fell, and it triggered something. Honestly, that's just a guess. I have no clue. All I know is that I've been at this pizza company for 10 years now. This is store 3 for me, and this has never, ever happened before. I've been reading this page over the last couple of weeks or so, and never thought that I'd have something to contribute, but this popped into my mind today. So I need to preface by stating this. A few years ago in college, I was on a dance team. Every fall we'd hold auditions, and a new girl joined the team. We'll call her Panda, as that's the nickname I have with her currently. Anyway, she was really nice, but I also didn't think much of it, as she was just an acquaintance at that point. Anyways, I was going through some dark stuff in college and was journaling one day. I remember specifically writing a line like, "I don't want to be here anymore, and I don't know what to do about it." Immediately after writing that, Panda's name popped into my head. It's almost like it was implanted in my head rather than a thought that came to the conscious me. I wrote her name with a question mark after it. I didn't know what to think. It was entirely random to me. I hadn't known her well enough to assume that she'd be going through anything ever for whatever reason. I wasn't sure what made me write her name down after that statement, but I just moved along with my journaling. Later on that same day, our dance team met at a party, and I could tell that something was off with her. Based on the weirdness of journaling earlier that day, I felt compelled to pull her aside and ask her what's wrong. It turns out that she was struggling with self-harm, which I could entirely relate to based on my own past. I was taken aback. That was a weird enough coincidence, but what really floored me is when she said the exact sentence I had written down earlier in my journal. "I don't want to be here anymore, and I don't know what to do about it." I guess this could be considered a common statement, and I know this isn't the craziest glitch ever if that's what this is, but I'm also not somebody to expect things like this to happen to me. I know the universe is weird, but my life feels very average and normal. What are the chances that I would write something down hours before it was said to me and predict who was going to say it? Ultimately, her and I ended up becoming best friends, and it was that day that made the difference for both of us. I have this story that's been in the back of my head for years. I've accepted that it will never be explainable, and I never will tell it to anybody because I myself am under the impression that people don't like to listen to other people's stories, because I typically don't. So I don't bother telling it to anybody, and it's kind of long and detailed, so it makes it even harder for me to want to tell it to somebody. I came across this subreddit and figured that if I were any of these people in here, in the subreddit, then I would love to listen to it, so here it is. It was a typical school night back in high school. I was the youngest sibling. I have 2 older brothers, and at the time I lived with my whole family, my mom and dad included. My grandparents are wealthy, so every once in a while we would meet them for dinner at their country club 15 minutes from my house. With everyone being busy on a weekday, it was normal for us to take more than one car, taking whatever was the most convenient way to get there on time to meet for dinner. This time specifically, I went with my older brother to this country club in his 2006-2007 Toyota Camry. I think it was a 2006 or 2007, I'm not really sure. But anyways, we went with my grandparents, and they bought it for him when he got his license, which was super generous of them to do that, as my family could not afford to get him one. We've always been very thankful that they did that to us, and in other ways they've helped us out over the years a lot. I can't remember exactly the year of the car, like I said, but it's not important. What is important, though, is that the car does not have Bluetooth at all. Therefore, it requires an auxiliary cord to play music from our headphones. Everything about this glitch is so vivid. We were on our way to dinner, and everything just seemed normal. We were playing music on the way to dinner. We get back to the car after dinner, and the sun is going down. However, now the black auxiliary cord he'd been using for this whole year had gone missing somehow. I remember searching the car, moving the seat back and forth, asking him if he was sure that he locked the door, and he said that he was. Me personally, I would have never have needed to have taken this from him, and I wasn't playing any kind of a prank. on my brother at all because I didn't need this cord outside of his car, so I definitely did not take it. After a while, we just kind of wrote it off as something that went missing, and then he's more into the paranormal than I am, and he was the one that first came up with this idea that it could be a glitch, perhaps. But whatever the case may be, we just stopped looking for it and eventually went home, and we just assumed that possibly it was a glitch. We moved on with our lives. It wasn't really that memorable, to be honest with you, but it was just a pretty cool thought and something funny that we had this auxiliary cord that just randomly went missing, you know. And I know people listening to this have heard a million stories about things that have gone missing, and that doesn't necessarily mean that it's a glitch. But there is something unexplainable that happened, and here's a twist. Fast forward probably about 5 years to last year, around the time of 2019 or 2020. I was a freshman in college. My fraternity had a parents' week, and both my parents couldn't make it, so I flew out to see my brother that weekend in his new home in Texas. For reference, we moved from New York, where we grew up after he graduated college for a job, and I am in Arizona for college, so it was not far or anything. I remember wanting to get In-N-Out Burger, so he went to his garage in his new apartment complex, and funny enough, he keeps the exact same car there that he's had since he was a senior in high school. Yeah, it's that old school 2006-2007 Toyota Camry that my grandparents got him, and it works, so he still drives it. We finally got to the car, and again I noticed it's that Camry, and I hadn't seen that car since I was back in school in New York, so it was cool to see it again. And I cannot make this up for the life of me. We step foot in the car, and lo and behold, it's the same exact auxiliary cord from 5 years ago, the one that we thought we lost that night in the car. Now I know what everybody's thinking, that obviously this has to be some new cord, and it just looks the same as the old one. However, we discussed this for a time before we left, and he convinced me that he wasn't playing a prank on me, and I convinced him the same. I know my brother well, and he would not be able to keep this up for a long time. What would be the point? The auxiliary cord reappeared 5 years later after we got into the car, and it shocked both of us. It felt like somebody or something was playing some kind of a weird prank on both of us. I can't explain enough that it was not a cord for an Apple device. It was a black cord that I remember went missing that night that we went to our grandparents' house. This story is totally legit, even though it might sound like it isn't, because it isn't the scariest story or creepiest you've ever heard of, but it's truly unnerving to me and my brother. As the title says, this unfolded over the course of 5 years, and so I'm glad that my brother and I experienced it. The reason that I added this little part at the end is because when I read stories on here, I like to confirm that they are true, otherwise they are not worth reading at all. I had to use the bathroom while driving home from work today, so I stopped at a Mod Pizza. Before I walk in, I remember this specifically in this Mod location, there was a pin lock on their bathroom doors. So I had to ask one of the employees. No joke. The second that I walked in the door, this guy that was sitting across the room, pink hair with a leather jacket, total wacko, just says, "It's 1739. I kept walking because I didn't think he was talking to me at first, but then I turned back and said, "What?" And then he said the code is 1739. And then he starts eating his pizza while watching me. I was very confused when this was happening. How could he have known that I was walking into this restaurant strictly to use the bathroom? I turned back again and said, "How did you know this?" Then he gave me a wink, boxed up his pizza, and just walked out the door. I don't really know how to explain this or how he knew. As I walked in, I hadn't even gone to the bathroom before he told me. He just mentioned it to me as I walked by, so I could have gone in any direction in that store. There's no way that he would have known in any way that I was going to go in there to use the bathroom, but he did. And why would he just up and box his pizza and leave right after telling me that? I have no idea how this random guy just read my mind today, or who he was, or where he went. This one sounds childish, but I really do want to get people's insight on what happened, and I know that I'm not the only one that has experienced this. In 2020, my ex and I parted ways for good, and I was both aggravated and upset. I had created him as my future sim husband, and I had decided to change him to just forget about him, as I did not want to be reminded about him at all, not even in this stupid game. I wanted my new husband to be totally different, opposite skin color, opposite style, and especially gray hair in order to be really sure that he's around my age. I'm 46 and my ex and I broke up essentially because of a huge age gap, which was excruciating for both of us. I chose a messy hairstyle, pretty formal, black clothes, big blue eyes, and other specific physical traits. I wanted him to play the guitar, and I built him a fancy recording studio in the game. I also wanted him to have a decent career and made him work at an office during the day. Just a few days later, my girlfriend was coming over and asked me if she could bring 2 other friends with her from a completely different part of the country, because she was going to be hanging out with them that day. And I said sure, it was no problem, she could go ahead and bring them over. I kid you not, when I went and opened the door for them, there he was. It was my husband from The Sims that I created. He looked into my eyes instantly through the window with an inquisitive look, and when he came in, he said, "Do I know you? It looks like we've met before." And my answer was, "Yes, you're my Sim husband." What an icebreaker, right? Not to mention that he matched every characteristic of his virtual self. Job type, playing the guitar in a band. The dress code was pretty much the same, and he had this gray, messy hair, big blue eyes, and the dad bod. Even with the shape of his mouth, it was almost identical to that online version of who he was. We got along perfectly on many, many levels that night, laughed a lot, and he mentioned later how fast we clicked and how many things we have in common, including tastes and interests, and especially music. Of course, he hit on me pretty heavily that night, and later on as well. I can't believe, nor would I ever be able to imagine how magical this would actually feel. And I don't know why this keeps on happening to me. I had another instance of a boyfriend that I created through The Sims, and he had a beanie with big headphones and this really weird hairstyle. A few days later, I'm hanging out with some friends and he arrives, exactly how I made him on The Sims. This was many, many years even before my last boyfriend. But it's just strange how these things happened.